Welcome to the third Legislative Forum in a series of 3 being sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Johnson County during the 2024 Iowa legislative session. Today, our forum focuses on issues related to public safety. My name is Barb Stein, and I'm pleased to facilitate today. I am a member of the League of Women Voters, as is our timekeeper, Kathleen Kamrick. The League is dedicated to educating voters on political and ballot issues. We encourage informed citizen participation in government. Membership in the League of Women Voters is open to anyone 16 years of age and older. Please join us. We can use your time, your talent, and your financial support for our ongoing operations. Government serves best when it is open and transparent. Democracy works best when more people are educated and involved. To learn more about the League, please speak to one of our members or reach out to us through our website or on our Facebook page. These forums are designed to give local citizens an opportunity to discuss current state legislative issues with their elected officials while the legislature is still underway. All Johnson County legislators are invited to participate. Representative Jacoby has a scheduling conflict. Zach, I don't know whether you know, but he's a new daddy, so he gets a little bit of a pass. Maybe he didn't go to sleep last night. So we don't know whether he will show up on Zoom or not, but he was going to come, but I think something else came up. Senator Driscoll and Representatives Hora and Sherman did not respond to our invitation to participate. I'd now like to introduce our legislators in attendance. Senators in order of seniority: Janice Weiner from District 45. Representatives in order of seniority, then alphabetically: Amy Nielsen, District 85, Elinor Levin, District 89, Adam Zabner, District 90. We will start the forum with 3-minute summaries from each of our legislators on recent legislative matters of interest to them individually. We're going to start with Janice Weiner, District 45. Please begin.
Thank you. Thank you, Barb. Thank you all for showing up today. Not necessarily obvious to show up on a holiday weekend, so really grateful to those of you who care about your state and democracy enough to show up. And I couldn't agree more with Barb that an important part of democracy is showing up. I really would love to see all of our Johnson County legislators here, no matter the political stripe. Nobody has a monopoly on good ideas. Nobody has a monopoly on the ability to listen to constituents. So really wish everybody were here. I want to touch on a few things today, top of mind, because the bill, Republicans in the Senate just passed the AEA bill this past week that was pushed through the House the prior week. The governor signed it. While I'm incredibly disappointed and really worry about the destabilizing effects this now largely fee-for-service program is going to have on the system that's been in place for 50 years, on our students, on our educators, on our state overall, I am also incredibly grateful to the thousands of Iowans who emailed and who stepped up and who showed up at the Capitol and who told their stories time after time. You really changed the trajectory of this legislation. Even if nobody asked for it and nobody wanted it, we ended up with a 3-month discussion and debate over this. Honestly, at the beginning, who knew what an AEA was? Folks who made use of their services knew, but now it's a statewide brand, and everybody understands how important it is and how it's helped not only special education students, but really every student across the state of Iowa and so many families. So it's not over. We're going to see what happens over the next year or two, and we're going to keep tracking it, and we'll see where it goes. Part of that bill, the way they passed it, was to wrap in state supplemental aid or school funding. It's too low. You can't You can't run a school system, public school systems, on 2.5%. We're nowhere near keeping up with inflation. I have all the great figures that my colleague Senator Kornbach has put together over the years based on LSA figures. We are in ballpark figures. So for a regular student, we are $900 per student behind where we should be. Just imagine if every school had an additional $900 for every single public school student, what that would mean in terms of resources and teachers and class sizes and all the rest of that. I wanted to also note their recent labor issues, the Tyson plant closing in Perry, Iowa. We, as Senate Democrats, our leadership has proposed a leadership bill to Senate Republican leadership, because that's what you can get, that's what you can start, the kind of legislation you can start at this point in the session, to go back to 39 weeks of unemployment for those who suffer a plant closing. They have said no to date. So anyway, I look forward to your questions, and thanks for coming.
All right. Thank you, Janice. Amy Nielsen, representative from District 85.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, everybody, for being here and for your vigilance and engagement. A lot of the people that we see here, we've seen for the past 3 months, and it really does make a difference to be engaged, as Senator Weiner mentioned earlier. So thank you very much for your engagement during this long and tumultuous session. It's been fun. So I just want to take this time to talk a little bit about a bill that we passed this week, House File 2664, and a lot of you might know it as the eminent domain bill. This bill was not everything that it could be or should be to protect landowners, but it was a small start. I want to make it very clear that Republicans did not pass that bill. They did not have 51 votes. They sat at 50 for, well, what felt like 10 or 20 minutes, but it was, it was a matter of seconds. And then Democrats put up the 51st vote and passed that bill for Iowa landowners. And I'm really disappointed that the media has not done their homework and their due diligence before reporting on that particular bill passing. The only people that voted against it were Republicans. So I just want to make it very clear that Democrats care about landowners, and we care about making sure that even if the Republicans can't, we will.
Thank you. Representative Elinor Levin from District 89.
Good morning. Thank you so much. Those of you who are here for the first time, those of you who come every time, those of you who show up, whether we're in session or not, it's genuinely, as Amy said, so helpful and so energizing to be reminded that folks back home are paying attention and care, and to know that when we go to Des Moines and frustrating or frightening things are put before us, I know that there are folks back home taking care of what needs to be taken care of here at the local level, and ensuring that I don't have to split my focus, that I can be paying attention there in Des Moines, and not worrying that the hatred is trickling down back home. I think the stated policy today is public safety, and I serve on the Public Safety Committee in the House. It's an interesting committee to serve on, because things that the priorities that come through public safety tend to either be genuinely good, pretty reasonable ideas that pass unanimously, or creating new mandatory minimums, increasing penalties, raising felony charges, things like creating new felonies, things like that. And I try really hard not to just be blanket opposed to every policy priority that we see before us in the Public Safety Committee, because I do think public safety is vitally important, right? The first thing we want to know is that we are safe in our communities. So I ask a lot of questions like, is there any data? Is there any evidence? Is there any research that's been done to suggest that raising this penalty, that increasing this statute, that creating this new felony is going to actually improve the situation? We have overcrowding in our prisons and jails. We have underfunding in our systems. And we just keep increasing penalties, which are going to make sentences longer, which are going to make terms of, I'm losing the word. Folks are under, after incarceration, probation, yes, probation periods longer, things like that. And we don't discuss the way that's going to further strain the systems. And so for me, that's really how I make my decisions, is do we have a system that's going to be able to handle the new strain? And are we putting this new strain on the system for a good reason? Is this going to improve outcomes in the situation? And with those two questions in mind, I find myself voting no a lot in public safety. Sometimes I'm the only one voting no, and I get to do that because my district understands that I'm not just arbitrarily voting no because I'm against safety, that I'm voting no because I want us to have the best outcomes we can, and that we want to have systems that are well thought out and compassionate. So thank you all for coming out today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Representative Adam Zabner, District 90.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone for being here. You know, we come to these events to listen to you. And last year we held one of these forums, was held by the League of Women Voters down in Hills. It was a really interesting one. It was a snowy day. And one of the things we heard a lot about down there was the importance of Hills Elementary to that community. And we heard from folks about what it means for a town like Hills to have a school, what it could mean to lose that school, which is the smallest school in ICCSD, Iowa City Community Schools. Last week, the legislature passed yet another school funding bill that drastically underfunds Iowa's public schools. And I talked about what I heard on that forum on the floor about the fact that it was a bill that would close Hills Elementary. And unfortunately, that's what we've seen happen. So I think there's a debate about AEAs, debate about teacher pay. I think it's really important to know there's no silver bullet when it comes to education. We need to properly fund our public schools. Instead of doing so, Republicans this week were working on a constitutional amendment that would require a 2/3 majority to increase corporate taxes. So their priority is not keeping Hills Elementary open. Their priority is keeping corporate taxes low. Two of my priorities I worked on this week that I'm excited about. I have a bill I've been working on since the interim on taking on the Medicaid enrollment gap. People who are eligible for Medicaid but are not enrolled, by allowing them to use their tax return to determine eligibility. That legislation passed 3-0 unanimously out of a House subcommittee in the Ways and Means Committee. I want to thank the ranking member of that committee, Dave Jacoby, who has worked a lot to help me get that hearing, to help get the Republicans on board, and then ended up voting for the bill. And so that was a really great piece of Johnson County teamwork. And then my other bill on accessibility for state parks. Since last time we were here, it had passed the House. It's now through a committee in the Senate. And I'm working really hard, talking to senators, hoping that we can get a floor vote scheduled and send that bill over to the governor. That would be a really great achievement this session, to work on making sure that everyone has access to the outdoors in Iowa.
Thank you, Adam. At this time, we will begin questions with one from the League, followed by, questions from our partner organizations, and then members of the audience. Today, our partner organizations are the Community Outreach Officer from Coralville, Community Outreach Officer from Iowa City, the Security Iowa Community, the School District, Iowa Safe Schools Partner, Johnson County, Brad Kunkel, Domestic Violence, Alsto Medea will represent DVIP. Oakland Heartland, Deb Duncase. The Community Director of Crisis Response, Justin Reek. Inside Out, Michael Hintz. Moms Demand Action, Temple Hyatt. And Johnson County Attorney Rachel Zimmerman Smith. We remind all participants that questions are limited to 1 minute. Please observe this time limit so that legislators can address as many questions as possible. Legislators, please limit your responses to 2 minutes. Our timekeeper will use cards to alert speakers when time is about up and when it is up. When alerted that your time is up, you may finish your sentence, and then we will move on. All legislators are welcome to join in responding to each question. The first question from the League is, what bills considered this session would you identify as improving public safety for Iowans?
So one thing I think I'm really impressed by what local leaders at the county level here in Iowa have done is the Mental Health Access Center that we have here in Johnson County, making sure that instead of the only opportunities to take people in mental health crisis being the ER or the jail, adding that access center. One piece of legislation that passed the House this session, I've been really excited to vote for it, was a bill that allows EMTs and ambulances to be reimbursed taking people to the access center. Previously, our local government was eating that cost, and it was making it more difficult to fund the access center. And so there's other barriers there, but I think that was a really great step forward. I was glad we were able to do in a bipartisan way.
Thank you.
That's probably about it.
I think the silence is indicative of the fact that we're having a hard time coming up with bills. And there are a number of things that are a little bit adjacent to public service, to public safety, that I hope will help public safety. We don't yet know what bill is going to come out to help to spend the opioid settlement funds, for example. Mm-hmm. There have been a few bills, one on the Senate side, a couple on the House side. Not sure what that's going to look like, but I'm hopeful that whatever comes out will go through HHS and other agencies to help create situations and possibilities for people so that they end up in treatment and not in our jails.
The one other that comes to my mind, excuse me, I think I maybe talked about this about 2 months ago. I was on a subcommittee on a bill that ended up passing the House, and I know it passed committee in the Senate, but I genuinely can't remember. I don't think it's come to the floor in the Senate. But that would basically allow federally licensed gun dealers to provide secure storage on site for folks who want to own but don't want to store at home. So, for example, if there's someone who is dealing with suicidality in the home, or someone who has new kids in the house and no longer wants to have their gun in the house, or just someone who, lives in an apartment and they don't really have a good option for secure storage. And that was something that I really felt had potential to be a small but meaningful improvement.
I'm having a hard time remembering if it passed the full Senate as well, but it definitely did pass committee. I want to say we voted on it on the floor. It's just everything is such and ends up being a blur at this point.
Yeah.
However, we do have a commitment on the part of leadership to pass it if it hasn't yet passed, and I agree it's a positive bill.
I think a lot of the public safety things that come up with the budget, and we haven't seen anything budget-wise yet. So stay tuned for how we are going to fund public safety from here on out.
Okay. Now we will go to our partner organizations questions, and these organizations have responded that they will attend. I will let you know if I hear from others. Okay. So we'll begin with Brad Kunkel. Let's see.
Yep.
Come on up.
I think microphone, please.
Come on up.
And Brad is from speaking for the Johnson County Sheriff's Office.
You can take it.
It's a little easier this way.
There we go.
Morning. First of all, thanks for being here. I appreciate everybody showing up and being here to talk about public safety. I got a lot of questions. I'm going to try and limit it to 2, and I don't want to put you on the spot. In the end, I just want to see if you're open to these conversations in the future, but both of them revolve around money. So first of all, as you know, our jail is about as old as I am. It's over 40 years old, and a jail inspector would tell you jails have about a 40-year lifespan. And as we've tried bond referendums in the past, they've consistently gotten the majority of the vote, but not enough of a majority to pass. However, another part of the code where if you do a joint city-county project, like have a 2080 agreement, the code actually doesn't have a specific requirement, so the kind of default process would be just a 50% threshold. So you have an inconsistency in these bond thresholds. And so what I would propose just to talk about is the support for carving out an exception, if anything, for public safety infrastructure projects, because the fact of the matter is public safety is the paramount goal and responsibility of the government is to provide public safety for its citizens. So I just want to kind of put that out there to think about as another path forward for getting something done, not only here, but in like Webster County had a failed one just this last year. And two, the other one involves inmate medical expenses. So somebody comes to jail, the county, ultimately the taxpayer pays the expenses. One of my lines for inmate medical expenses is about $80,000 a year is what we budget for to pay for medications, medical treatment, all those things. But we've had instances over the years where one person with some sort of serious health problem can be in custody and completely wipe that line out many times over. And we have to amend that in the budget. So it's just another problem we see is kind of who pays for inmate medical expenses while they're in jail, because sometimes, if I'm not mistaken, benefits are suspended while they're in custody. We need to find a better solution for that too. So again, I'm not asking for necessarily an opinion. I just want to put it on your plate to talk about in the future and know that these are real problems affecting us locally.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. With respect to the medical expenses, I think that's an issue that we need to deal with statewide, because one of the things we're seeing is also aging of the population in our prisons, and those expenses are only going to grow. So it's absolutely an issue that the legislature should deal with on a priority basis.
Yeah, on the issue of bonding, I'd have to go into the code and see what you're talking about. But I do think, when we have a situation where folks are being, having to be transported across the state, where family members are having to drive long distances to visit people, that doesn't really serve anyone. And so we have to think as a community about what we're going to do with the future of the jail. We've seen plenty of jails around the country with really bad situations that arise due to deterioration of the building, and I don't want to see that happen in Johnson County. I want to make sure that we have a jail that allows us to protect the rights of everyone involved.
Especially remembering that the people both working in those facilities and being held in those facilities are our community members. And we need to be treating them with compassion and ensuring that they're in a safe space.
If I'm not mistaken, from my tour of the jail, that there are a lot, not just here but elsewhere in the state. There's a disproportionate number of people that are currently housed in a jail because there's not a better place for them. They may, particularly those that may have serious mental health issues, the jail is not where they should be. We as a state need to do much better on that. That should not be the job of our law enforcement.
Okay. Is Alsto Medea here?
Alta.
Okay. She is speaking on behalf of Domestic Violence Prevention Program.
And it's Alta Medea is my name. I know most of you. Hi, thank you so much for being here today and for giving us time in a very busy legislative season. Many of you have received emails from us, and our constituents are supporters this week, so you have no surprise coming when I'm asking about funding for victim services. At the federal level, it has been determined that we will have a 33% cut in funding, and that impacts about 10,000 Iowans at minimum. Many of the programs throughout the state are at risk of closing because of cuts of that magnitude. And so my question really for you all is, how will the state respond? Attorney Byrd has said that she is in support of funding victim services at $4.6 million. She released that in December and then again in February. And so as our representatives, I'd love to hear what your plan is to address that funding gap.
Alta, could I ask first at what level you believe victim services need to be funded to be adequate?
Yeah, we are asking in statewide coalition, Iowa Coalition Against Sexual Assault and Domestic Violence, both are jointly asking for $10 million. That would keep services as they are. So that would really just be level funding the need that we have and not accounting for the 38% increase of victims reaching out for help.
Do you know what is causing the 33% cut in the federal? Is that just something, or are we not doing something to get that money?
That is a very long answer, but it is actually because of the VOCA Fix Act has not completely addressed the need. So in 2021, the feds did approve the VOCA Fix Act, which would put the funding from fees and fines back into the Crime Victims Fund. It is not refilling at the rate we had hoped. It's a little slower than anticipated, and so that is accounting for that loss. We're expecting next year to have that be addressed, but at this time there is that cut, and the federal government has said they will not sort of support that, put scaffolding around it temporarily.
I will. I'll just add, I because we did have these emails coming in this past week, and it was sort of information I hadn't previously. The 33% cut was something I wasn't aware of, the federal cut, and so I spoke to our ranking member on justice systems budget, because I don't serve on that budget and I don't know as much about it as I would need to in order to respond. And then I also spoke to our research staff, and what was really helpful but also frustrating was to learn that we don't really have targets in the justice system, in the governor's budget, that the governor's system's budget came out before we knew about this 33% cut. And so we don't really know, and since we haven't seen House budget targets yet, we haven't seen Senate budget targets yet, we don't even know where we're at. And so what I wanted to say is the early advocacy before those targets have come out, and keeping that up over the next week, I would say, like really hitting it this weekend and ensuring that folks who are working on the justice system's budgets are hearing about it, is the best option, I would say, at this moment, in terms of just making sure that the folks who are writing those targets have this need in mind. The reality is that over a year ago, our AG paused funding for specific portions of the victims' services funds. The compensation fund is meant to be distributed without political interference, that's a good word for it. And yet folks who have been dealing with the consequences of rape and sexual assault have not had their requests met for over a year. And so hearing that AG Byrd is, stated in December that she's in favor of the $4.6 million, well, that would definitely give her an excuse to continue not funding those services. So I'm not terribly surprised to hear that.
Yeah, I absolutely want to see victim services continue to be funded. I think this should be a priority as we talk about the justice system budget and how we're supporting as a state people in really difficult situations. Want to echo what Elinor said. I think that budget should be free from some of the political games that our Attorney General has been playing. 11 months ago now, she announced a so-called audit of how those funds are being used. This week it was reported by the Des Moines Register that audit is sitting in her office and she doesn't want to release it. I have some theories for why, but it's just unacceptable. This isn't a game. I'm sure you know. I mean, these are people's lives, and so we really need to make it a priority up at the Capitol to make sure that these are being properly funded, and then that the money is actually going to the crucial and sometimes life-saving services that we know that it's meant for.
Thank you.
I would add that I'm grateful to Johnson and Polk counties for stepping in where the AG has pulled back emergency contraception services and funding. Point out that the funding for those does not come from taxpayers. It comes from the Victims' Crime Fund. Has nothing to do with taxpayer funds. But this is also a good opportunity to look at the way the budget is built right now in Iowa. Pre-COVID, at a minimum, we had a robust system of budget subcommittees in both the House and the Senate that would meet jointly, ask questions of departments, come up with budget numbers, give Iowans an opportunity to weigh in and see this in a transparent way, at least in the Senate. That we have never reverted to regular order budget. I'm supposed to serve on the budget subcommittee. In these 2 sessions, it has yet to meet. So we do not see, at a minimum in the Senate, we do not see budget numbers before they come out in committee or on the floor. Last year, they passed blank budget bills through committee and then simply filled in the numbers just before they came to the floor. The budget is arguably one of the most important things we do in the legislature. Iowans deserve transparency. They deserve to be able to ask questions and see where their tax dollars are going, and that's not currently happening.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Deb Duncase on behalf of Open Heartland.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to the League of Women Voters to have Open Heartland ask a question of the legislators today. And I have to say that I have always really appreciated the legislature of Iowa. I was born, grew up in Iowa, educated here, raised my family. I've always been a proud Iowan until really recently. And the bill, SF 2340, is an embarrassment to this state. My question to you is, and I don't know how in the world you're going to answer this, but how does this anti-immigration bill, that's actually in my mind a very anti-human bill, it targets our community's hardworking people who are dedicated to their families, who are trying to find a way of life that helps their families thrive. How in the world does this bill make our state and our community safer? That's my question.
Mm-hmm. So it doesn't. It doesn't. I had the opportunity last weekend. I'm on the executive committee of a group called the National Caucus of Hispanic State Legislators, Hispanic state representatives and senators from across the country. And unfortunately, we met last weekend in Atlanta. Almost all of us that serve in Republican-controlled states have seen very similar legislation, copycat bills of a bill coming out of Texas, SB 4. These are bills that try to make it a state crime, make immigration, undocumented immigration, a state crime. These are 100% political bills, right? In fact, in the subcommittee in the House, Representative Steve Holt admitted that he did not think the bill was constitutional and used the bill as an opportunity to rant against President Biden. Now, there is undeniably a problem at the border. It is undeniable that our system has some serious issues. We have people waiting years to have an asylum hearing because of the lack of judges. We have a problem with funding at the border. This is a federal issue. Our federal government needs to get its act together, and Republicans in Congress, including the 4 members of the House of Representatives from Iowa and the 2 senators, need to get behind actual solutions. There was a bipartisan bill in the Senate, in the U.S. Senate, that would have taken on some of these problems. Yeah. And Donald Trump killed the bill because he thought it was more convenient for his political campaign if there's an issue at the border. He killed the bill because he'd rather have the issue than the solution. Folks, that's the problem with our politics. Republicans would rather have the issue than the solution. We need a fair immigration system. We need to treat people that live here in Iowa, contribute to our communities with respect. These bills are really, really dangerous. They create a lack of trust with law enforcement. You know, if someone is worried that, law enforcement might ask about their immigration status, are they really going to reach out about a crime they've witnessed? Are they really going to have that relationship with their police? These types of bills make our communities less safe, and it's because Republicans would rather have the issue than the solution.
Is it possible to ask a follow-up to that?
Pardon me?
Can I ask a follow-up to that?
Do you feel like, did anybody else want to say anything about that part?
Adam did a great job. I just want to say that I stated basically all of that on the floor of the Senate. And I told everyone that that it was a political gotcha. And if they wanted a solution, they really should contact their federal delegation. And that we do not have, our police are not immigration enforcement, our judges are not immigration judges. And we are not the address for it. And the trope that somehow every state is a border state. Nope.
The only thing, I mean, Adam said it best. I would only add that not only does it not make our community safer, it also destabilizes the entire economy of our state. Mm-hmm. What was your follow-up?
If the bill is signed, which I'm guessing it probably will, and goes into effect on July 1st, at Open Heartland, we work with hundreds of families that are immigrants in this community. What do we tell them? How do we help protect them from this law?
I think it's a really difficult question. I expect there to be litigation about this law, and we've already seen in Texas serious questions about the constitutionality of that law. But I think it's a difficult question. It points out the real problem here, which is that we need compassionate solutions that keep these people in mind. I mean, I just think about the 6 folks in Baltimore, immigrants to this country, who died fixing potholes on that bridge just last week. I think about the 1,200 workers in Perry, many of them immigrants and refugees who, after going to work all the way through the pandemic, putting themselves at risk to keep our food system afloat, were laid off by Tyson this month. I think about the 260 workers in West Liberty, many of them immigrants, who were laid off at the turkey plant out there. Also, after going through the pandemic and working hard to keep our food system afloat, we need to treat these people with respect. They're a very important part of our community. And these bills are just plain wrong.
Thank you all.
I would just ask that you tell them, and I think I can speak for the table here, that just tell them that we are glad that they are here.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I do think there's a high chance that it will be enjoined by the courts.
All right, thank you very much. Temple Hyatt is next from Moms Demand Action.
Good morning. My name is Temple Hyatt, and I am here on behalf of Moms Demand Action. I am a survivor of gun violence, and I'm also a veteran. The tragedy in Perry, Iowa, has impacted many of us. Guns are the leading cause of death for children and teens in America. And we know there are solutions out there. We know that strengthening our secure storage law, again, encouraging a culture of responsible gun ownership. We know that red flag laws all across the country work. But instead, our state legislator is providing solutions that we don't need. The belief that highly trained teachers armed with guns that are able to respond as quickly as trained law enforcement officers is a fantasy. Law enforcement officers receive hundreds of hours of training, but under House File 2586, school staff will receive significantly less. My question, and I guess this will only be to Janice, because it will be on the Senate floor soon. How do you plan to debate this bill? Because currently this legislation does not address the types of guns that will be permitted, the number of guns a school employee can carry, the storage of guns in our schools, what level of proficiency must be demonstrated, and these things all should concern all of us, but as a veteran, concern me greatly.
Thank you, thank you, Temple. You just put out a pretty good list for for debate. To be honest, I don't yet have a good sense of whether or not it will come to the floor. Last year, the so-called omnibus did not come to the Senate floor and the omnibus was not given a vote. And I believe that was because the insurance industry basically talked to the Republican Senate leader Whitver and said, you cannot force us to insure schools if you're going to allow guns in parking lots and so forth. I have talked to a variety of folks about the insurance, among other things, about the insurance issues inherent in this. They did not, to my knowledge, they have not really engaged the insurance lobby as happened last time, and that may seem like an odd issue for me to be raising. But in some of these debates, you need to look for all the allies you have, and if a school cannot afford to be insured, then they need to think twice about what they're doing and why it is they want to do it. So I haven't looked at the bill closely yet, but I know that there are many other solutions out there that we have not even started to address. I filed a number of bills this year, including an Extreme Risk Protection Act and a Safe Storage Act and a couple of others on the gun safety side. We have to start there. You don't start by deciding to willy-nilly, in a sense, arm teachers when the figures I've seen that even a highly trained law enforcement officer hits target 18% of the time. It's just I will add that I talked to somebody who's going to run for the Senate in one of our districts this year, who is actually a school safety officer at a high school, and he said, "Look, I will go into a bathroom when I see too many kids in there to try and break it up. Can you imagine if I were armed and I walked in there and some of these big kids jumped me?" So I don't think that the bill, if it comes to us, is the solution. I can tell you that if it does come to the floor, it will pass. So you all need to talk to every senator you know, or anybody you know who knows a senator, to tell them why they need to be pursuing other solutions.
So my understanding is that this legislation would include civil and criminal qualified immunity for those teachers. So I think that's,
And
I
for the
don't know how
district.
that works in real life application, but that is the request of the legislation of how they're trying to get around the insurance issues.
Right, but the people I talked to who know insurance say that it was not crafted well. It was crafted in order to relate to meet the demands of some certain legislators in the House, but that's not necessarily going to solve the problems.
So your suggestion is to reach out to Senate leadership?
Yes.
The current bill also does not address who owns the firearms. It also does not address where they are outside of school hours. It also does not address something like a 3-point retention holster, like public safety officials use to ensure that a student who jumps an adult cannot get that weapon. It also does not address, oh gosh, there's at least 2 other things.
It's not a great bill.
It's a real bad idea, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So there's a bill, President Biden leaders in Congress negotiated a bipartisan gun safety bill at the federal level. And one of the things that bill does, to your point, is provide funding to states to implement red flag laws. Actually, one of our senators, Joni Ernst, voted for that bill in Congress. House Democrats have introduced a red flag law that would draw down those federal funds that Joni Ernst voted for, keep Iowans safe, and it hasn't even received a hearing.
Yeah, I did too on the Senate side.
So it's wrong. This proposal, not only providing qualified immunity to the teachers, but then on the House side there was a proposal to provide state funds to schools to actually pay for the guns. It's ridiculous. It is a distraction. It is dangerous. It's not in any way a solution. When we debated the bill in the House last year, there was a bill allowing guns on school grounds. A couple of us, after the bill passed, read the full list of school shootings since Columbine, which was about a month before I was born. And it took us nearly 45 minutes. This year, after the bill passed, we read the full list of school shootings since last year when we did that last legislation, and it still took us quite a long time. You know, this has to end, and there are real solutions, and we can't just continue to let Republicans play politics. We know the vast majority of Iowans want common sense action.
The other big one that really concerns me in the bill is that it does not address the fact that parents don't get to know if their kid is in a classroom with a gun. What happened to parental choice?
Right. There are also other, I think some of the money was supposed to go to building safety and security. There are plenty of tried and true methods. As someone who was in the State Department for 26 years, I know we spent a lot of time and effort hardening buildings, but we also, like the State Department, security provides grants to international schools to put film or Mylar on the windows as a way of creating a safer school. That doesn't obviously solve the question of the enormous number of guns that we have here, but it is a safety measure, and those exist.
Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Rachel Zimmerman Smith on behalf of the Johnson County Attorney Office.
Good morning, everyone. First, I just want to thank all of you for your hard work, and also just for calling me when you have questions about bills involving public safety or what the County Attorneys Association is proposing. I really appreciate that we're able to have a dialogue, and even if we disagree, we have always been able to have conversations about it, and I just really appreciate being able to talk to you about it and that you've been so accessible. My question is about the property tax levy cap and how that's affecting our local governments. You could see in the budget discussions at the city and county level this year that it's already starting to raise its specter, and local governments fund public safety and the judicial system, mental health, all of those kinds of things. And so is there any discussion of how the state is going to support local government and not defunding public safety, which is what the people who passed these restrictions say they are in favor of?
I just want to zoom out to 30,000 feet on the tax discussion. I mentioned it earlier. Republicans this week passed in the House the first go-round of a constitutional amendment that would require a 2/3 majority in the House and Senate to increase corporate or individual income tax. Now, one of the things I discussed on the floor, really the focus of my comments, was what the impact of that will be, which is we've seen many budget crunches in the history of Iowa. I'm sure we'll see them again. And if it's really hard to raise corporate and individual income tax, what do? You implement a grocery tax, you raise sales tax, you cut funding from local governments, and they increase property tax. We know that all those taxes are regressive, meaning that the poorest Iowans pay a larger percentage of their income into those taxes than the richest Iowans do. We know that that's on purpose. Republicans have taken away Iowa's progressive tax system. They've focused on giving tax cuts to millionaires, the richest people in our state. I voted for property tax legislation, and I was glad to provide relief. On the other hand, it's not a head scratcher when the state refuses to fund services that you see property taxes increase in local government. And until we have a state budget that actually funds the services Iowans rely on, we're going to see the back end property tax, sales tax increases. And so that's really the 30,000 feet, and you're 100% right. If they care about public safety, maybe they should think about funding it and maybe funding the victim services that we talked about earlier too.
So Rachel, if there are specific things that you or the cities want fixed, can you let us know, please?
Yes.
I'm talking to Senator Dawson, or we talked to Senator Dawson, who was the original author of the bill, on a regular basis. At a minimum, I would like to see, and this is just the bare minimum, I would like to see them do a cleanup bill this year that grandfathers levies that voters previously approved. So you could still stack those on top of the approved levy, like the library levy here, for example, so that those are not seen as part of the overall levy. But if the voters previously approved it, clearly the voters value it and want to continue it. So I'm sure there are other fixes that need to be made. If there are, because we've heard from public safety folks across the state that they're really worried about that. Senator Dawson himself is a member of DCI and law enforcement. He ought to listen to them. So specific list, happy to bring them to him.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
I'll just say, as when the entire delegation gets together, I feel like the person who is the lowest level expert on our tax system. And so I tend to make sure that I understand the bills that come before us before I vote on them, and that is my level of understanding of our tax system. That being said, the reality of civic society is that we pay taxes so that we can have things we all value, so that we can pool those resources for the public good. And one of the things we've determined to be a part of that public good is public safety. Another one is education. I don't need to go through the list, you guys know. So when the goal is lower taxes, that means we get reduced services. That's literally how it works. If the money's not there, the services aren't there.
And I just have one follow-up question, because I did want to follow up on what Alta said. What Victim Services does is just important for all legislators to know, is that we work with them literally every day. Sheriff Kunkel's office works with DVIP every day and all of the victim support services, and so that's really important to us. At the federal level, part of the reason that the funding is less is because there's less collection of fines and costs from defendants, which I think that's fine. There's no reason to increase costs on people who are unable to pay these huge fines, but you can't keep doing that without backfilling the services. And so I know we all want to reduce fines and burdens on people in the criminal justice system, and I support those efforts, but I do think the reality is that the money has to come from somewhere. And if we keep cutting those, Victim Services is going to continue to suffer unless there is some permanent solution to it. And they're going to come back every year and get cut back further and further. So I appreciate anything you can do to figure out another way to fund them so that they don't have to keep coming back, because they provide a critical service. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else from our sponsoring organizations that I have failed to recognize? All right, now we're ready for audience questions. And please make a line at the podium to ask your question. And remember that your question is 1 minute. And all legislators will have the opportunity to respond to each question, and will each have 2 minutes to respond. So, line them up.
Hi, I'm Susan Enzel, and I'm with the League of Women Voters and Moms Demand Action, but I'm going to ask a more general question because it keeps eating at me. And what goes through my mind is the Queen is in the counting house, counting out the money. We have a $3.5 billion surplus in our accounts, I believe, at the state level, that is not being spent, unless it's to send highway patrol officers, which are not in an abundant supply in Iowa, to the border. Is there anything that can be done to force her to spend money that has been already allocated by the legislature in past and present years?
Vote?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything that we as a legislature can do to force that. It's, sorry, show me your budget and I'll show you your priorities. Look at our budget. The Republicans' priorities are cut, and boast about a surplus, while Iowans are hungry and losing jobs, can't afford housing, can't afford their medications. cutting education, cutting educational services. I wish we could. I really wish we could. There's so many things that we need to be doing a better job on. There's so many things we could use that money for. And, the trope of, well, this is only one-time money. We can't put one-time money in a budget. Well, sure you can. You put it in for one-time funding. That would help a lot of things. That would help make a lot of places whole, as Alta talked about earlier. One-time funding, because it's going to get fixed next year. That's not their priority.
They have also not, our Republican colleagues have not been putting together budgets that come anywhere near to, anywhere near to maxing out their spending authority. I think last year it was around 82%. They obviously, there's at least 15%, if not more there, of allocable funds in the state budget that they are squirreling away. And I'd also like to point back to vouchers, which is still quite unbelievably an uncapped fiscal mandate. So you never know in any given year how much money is going to go into that.
And it came in way over budget this year, and is going to come in even more over budget as the phases kick in. And in just a couple years, the richest family in Des Moines will be able to use public money to send their kids to Dowling Catholic High School at the same time that, as mentioned, we're closing public schools in the state of Iowa.
And since we're on public safety, I'd like to point out something that that we all heard, and if we were paying attention to Chief Justice Christensen, and when she gave her State of the Judiciary address the very first week of session, the judicial branch is a separate and equal branch of government. They are really tremendously underfunded. We do not pay judges what they needed. We do not pay contract attorneys what they need. We do not pay court reporters what they need to be paid. If you're a contract attorney and you can go over to, and you're in the Quad Cities and you can be a member of both bars and you can earn $150 an hour for your services and only $75 in Davenport, where are you going to go? We have a shortage of people applying for judgeships, and that's not an accident. Our court system is truly close to being in crisis in terms of the personnel, the judges, contract attorneys. We need to put some of our money into that third branch of government.
Yeah, the balance in the building is so out of whack that we need more balance in order to be able to do anything on that front, is what I would say.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, my name is Liz O'Hara, and I also am a member of Moms Demand Action. My question has to do with some of the catchphrases that we hear about in committee hearings in the legislature when they're discussing expansion of gun rights. The attempt to maintain basic gun safety protections, and thank you for your efforts on that. It's difficult. It's often attacked as a burden on responsible gun owners. And I just, that phrase, responsible gun owners, seems to indicate that there's a recognition that with your rights come responsibilities. I wish I had the opportunity today to ask gun rights advocates what they think those legal responsibilities are with respect to buying and selling guns, or where and how they're used, how they're stored, et cetera. And if we, as Adam suggested, stepping back 30,000 feet, take a look at sort of both sides. What rights do you think the public has in terms of being protected from these lethal weapons that could be protected by law, and really restore some balance in the way we look at this issue?
I think one thing to recognize is that responsible gun owners believe in responsible gun ownership. And they don't mind having burdens placed on them in order to have their firearms. I have a friend that I asked one day, just how many guns do you have? And he had to stop and think about it. And it was more than two hands. And I said, okay, well, how are they stored? I know you have kids. We went through all of it. And he was fine doing all of that because it's his right to have them, and he wants to have them responsibly. And so I think that we tend to make these special gun laws for people who don't want to be responsible. They don't want to have any burdens. They just want to have, to take a phrase here from Senator Weiner, they just want to be willy-nilly with their gun ownership, and that's not how it's supposed to be. You're right. There's got to be some kind of recognition that if you are going to have, with rights come certain responsibilities.
Yeah,
it's bad. Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, I'm a proud driver. Ever since I was 14.
He's not a great driver, though. Notice that. He said proud. I've ridden with him once.
I had to take a vision test to get my license. I had to take a driving test. I have to have liability insurance in case I hit anyone. I can't drive if I'm under the influence of drugs or alcohol. I mean, there's a lot of restrictions in place to make sure that I exercise that privilege of driving in a way that's safe for our community. And I think when we think about gun ownership, we can think about it in a similar way. We have a Second Amendment in this country, but what are we doing to protect people? There's a lot of, like I mentioned, common sense gun safety measures that are supported by the majority of Iowans. Republicans have refused to even give us a hearing when we introduce those bills, and not one of those bills would violate anybody's Second Amendment rights.
I would also add that
I'm sorry.
Well, I would also add that all of those restrictions that Adam points out are on a piece of equipment that has a use other than causing injury or death. I appreciate the analogy, but I also get a little bit frustrated with the analogy of guns to cars, because the purpose of a gun is to dislodge a bullet at high speed, right? So this is a piece of equipment that the purpose is to be used as a weapon. And so whether you're dislodging that bullet at a target at a range, or whether you're dislodging it at an animal with a hunting license, or whether you're dislodging it at a person, that's the purpose of the piece of equipment. And so that makes it, by definition, a dangerous piece of equipment. And so we need to take that into consideration and be realistic about what is responsible, what is reasonable in regards to having those pieces of equipment in our civic society.
Thank you. Can I ask a very quick follow-up? Mm-hmm. Do you see, based on what you've observed over the last couple of years, do you see any possible areas of common ground on advancing gun safety?
Not as long as we have two particular members in the House. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
I would say there are people getting creative, and I appreciate that. But only if people don't know what you're actually doing.
Yeah.
For the time being.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Hi, Temple Hyatt again. And kind of as a segue with what Liz was speaking about. Senator Weiner, you mentioned House File 2421, which would limit civil liability for federally licensed gun dealers who enter into voluntary hold agreements with individuals. That is currently on the calendar, so it has passed through the House and the Senate unanimously, so I hope that will be heard. Again, as a veteran, finding, again, those creative ways, and that is a bipartisan measure that both sides have been overwhelmingly in agreement of, finding ways where we can voluntarily allow gun owners to remove guns in their homes and giving them a safe place to store them. I would encourage you to try to find the common ground. If we could somehow, I know we're talking about budget and money, but if we could find funding to allow that to be free for veterans, that would be wonderful. Somewhere down the road, year 2, 3, 4, 5. I had a conversation this week with a gun owner, again, owned many guns, and wanted to keep them safe, but was hesitant to go out and get a safe for his long guns because they're about $5,000, and that's a heavy burden for some. How can we provide a tax credit, or at least waiving sales tax on the purchase of those items here in Iowa? So I think that there may be creative ways that we can promote secure storage and again leading to a culture of responsible gun ownership.
I'll just say, Temple, we're not the ones who aren't looking for creative and collaborative ways to work on these issues or to work on the budget.
And also, when it comes to issues like common sense gun safety measures, universal background checks, red flag laws, it is not that there is a big disagreement among the people of the state of Iowa. The people of the state of Iowa overwhelmingly want this. The disagreement is with the interest groups that control our legislature. It's that simple.
Yep. And we're seeing that in a bill. I don't know if it's going to end up coming before the Senate, but the which is the license plate that would the
Gadsden flag.
The proceeds of which would benefit the NRA. Even I think it just made it through subcommittee on our side, but even our Republican colleagues seemed disturbed by that. So. Not convinced that it's going to make it to the floor or through committee or to the floor in the Senate. But I really appreciate the creative thinking because those are some things we may actually be able to do, and they may seem small, but every incremental step for safe storage is important. I put in one of the number of bills I put in this year was to create a free trigger lock fund, so that anybody who wanted one could just pick one up and people could contribute it. It wouldn't come from state funds. It would just be free. You need one, come get one.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Do you mind? I have some one-pagers to give out. Do you mind if I? All right.
Thank you. I got it.
Hello, my name is Zach Palmer, and I'm the founder of Coalition to Abolish Prison Slavery at Iowa. And I'd like to discuss Senate Study Bill 1144. And just to kind of give you my background, so my dad went to federal prison, and while he was in federal prison, he only made 25 cents per hour. And he also served 20 years in the military. And so I just think that we need to pay our incarcerated workers minimum wage, because the entire time he was incarcerated, he only called me and my brothers and my 2 brothers and my sister once, because and we also come from a single parent household due to losing our mom at the age of 10. So I just think that if we paid incarcerated workers minimum wage, that it would reduce the amount of time to pay back victim and state restitution. It would also eliminate the financial burden on families who have a loved one incarcerated. And then it would also reduce their recidivism, because they're less likely to come back to prison, because if their fines and fees are paid off when they come out, they're less likely to return back to crime. So I just think that ending the exception will increase public safety by alleviating the hurdles of reentry.
Would you identify your organization again?
Yep, Coalition to Abolish Prison Slavery. And then the question I had was, why does our state jail and prison system need legal slavery to operate?
Because it's allowed by the Constitution currently, is the answer. I mean, Zach, you and I spoke a couple months ago, and it kind of spurred me to do a little poking and finding out the number of industries that would be financially impacted by your proposal. And I'm not saying that because I'm saying it's a bad idea, but it was really interesting to me to learn, our highway signs, furniture, safety vests. I mean, just the diversity of things that are being produced at a affordable cost because the people doing the work are not being paid minimum wage was really fascinating to me. And it's something that I think until we do make it illegal, it's going to continue happening because there are certain things that people don't want to pay full price for at the state level.
Just thank you for this, and thank you for your activism. I'm sorry that it is because it impacted your family negatively that you are doing this, but thank you for doing it.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate the information. Thank you. We'll read through it.
And I'm hopeful we can continue the conversation, and I'm open to. Thank you.
Yeah, I actually have already talked to our staff about introducing a bill next year to it's a very small piece of this, but to reduce not just at the state level, but figure out how to have a system so that people can have phone calls without it costing a lot.
I'd be interested in that.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to this. I have 2 quick questions.
We can't hear.
Sorry, let me try that again. Is that working better and going through the mic too?
A little bit.
You could just take it.
Yeah, pull it out.
You're
All
just
right,
tall.
I'll be
It's
tall.
fine.
There we go. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So I have 2 questions. The first one is there's been a fair bit of press lately to follow up on this, court fees and how people who are, even people who are deemed innocent of crimes can walk away with exorbitant fees that in most cases the state of Iowa cannot collect. Is there any momentum in the legislature to go along with sort of the renewed attention on this to fix the situation? My other one is unrelated, and I'm sure I'm not the best person in the room to talk about this, but I know in the last couple of years of legislative sessions, there has been, I think particularly in the House, a movement to try and treat victims of human trafficking as victims and to get additional victim services funding, and as opposed to treating them as criminals and putting them through the criminal justice system that way. Is that live and going anywhere? Thank you.
Would you mind telling us your name?
Oh, I'm Shannon Patrick. No particular affiliation relevant for these.
Gotta say, I don't know of anything.
There were 3 different versions of the human trafficking bill last year, and we landed on one, and it passed the House. I don't believe it passed the Senate. So then this year they all went through judiciary, and
I'm sorry. At this point of the session, everything's a blur, and if it happened in January, I probably am not going to remember it at this point.
I'm pretty sure we've seen at least one
think we've
version of
seen
it
one,
on
yeah.
the floor in the Senate, but I can't give you the details right now. I apologize.
I mean, honestly, I would text Amy Campbell and just.
We can follow up with you, Shannon. Sorry.
Good morning, Diane Duncan Goldsmith, and I admit that I have lost track of lots of pieces of legislation, so I don't know how all of you do it, so thank you for that.
Great staff.
The boards and commissions piece, we know that the governor will probably get rid of the gender balance requirement, but in listening to the hearing and reading trying to read the thousands of public comments, it seems to me lots of the things that were trying to be eliminated or combined or reduced impact safety, be that health, be that boiler inspectors, be that registered dietitians commission, be it so many boards and commissions, all of which were voluntary organizations. I was on one of the boards. Where is that with combining and eliminating and making Iowans less safe because of all the changes?
So I served, Senator Weiner and I both served on the summer interim committee that proposed these recommendations. Recommendations did not come from Senator Weiner and I.
We were ex
to be
officio,
clear.
to be
I know.
clear.
And I served on the subcommittee for this bill. in the House and for the gender balance piece, which I think has been signed by the governor at this point, or at least has passed both houses as a separate bill. I'll start with the gender balance. Man, it was really disappointing to see that fly through the legislature. All Democrats opposed it. I think that gender balance requirements were really one of the unique and special things about the state of Iowa. And I think one of the issues on the whole boards and commissions thing is to understand that these boards and commissions, many of them maybe represent a certain profession or a certain interest group, but they're not there to do that. They're there to serve the people of the state of Iowa. And in my view, that means being representative of the people of the state of Iowa. And I think gender balance was a great way to go about trying to do that. And I never really heard a good argument for removing it. And so very disappointed to see that go. On the broader issue of boards and commissions, in the House, we worked really hard in a bipartisan way with the chair of state government, Jane Bloomingdale. Representative Nielsen and I have been in those conversations since the summer. And actually, we got to a bill eliminating about 50 boards and commissions that we thought were no longer necessary. Some of them don't meet. This hasn't been done ever in the history of Iowa. A lot of times the legislature, if there's a complicated problem that they don't want to solve, they just create a new board. And so I thought the House bill was really good. It actually passed unanimously on the State Government Committee. Unfortunately, the Senate has come back with a proposal that does get rid of a lot of those public safety sort of boards and commissions. So the Senate bill is definitely a no-go for me. And actually, we're going to spend some time this weekend, Representative Nielsen and I, going through those two proposals and being in negotiation with what we'll accept. And so I appreciate you bringing it up. It's one of the big issues of the year. And I think the frame that we're using to look at it is, how do we ensure that we are keeping Iowans safe, that we're not losing oversight that Iowans need. And we will not vote for proposals that include the elimination of any board that we think keeps Iowans safe.
Thank you much. So Adam did a good job of summing it up. I was also on the subcommittee on the Senate side. The bill on the Senate side is being run by Senator Chris Knoyer, and it's not. You all may have actually a better idea of where it stands. I know that Senator Knoyer had discussions with Representative Bloomingdale. I think that the process that Representative Bloomingdale went through was the process that actually the Boards and Commissions Review Committee from this past summer should have done and did not. It was much more thorough. It took into account what the concerns of Iowans. What the bill that the Senate was at least originally looking at was the governor's bill, which is front-loaded with a lot of stuff that we definitely do not need, including removing some of the prerogatives of the legislature. At a minimum, Senator Knoyer has told me that she's taken those out. She claimed to have also listened to a number of folks. I was trying to hunt her down last week to find out where this stands. She said they had an amendment that was in the works, and they were adding, or rather subtracting some in the works. They were going to take out any boards and commissions that had basically just been put in place by the legislature in the last few years. So I'm not quite sure where it stands, but definitely we need to be looking at where Iowans' voices are needed, what is public safety in these, and where are the stakeholder voices. So I'm going to continue to follow up on that as somebody who was part of this process, has been part of this process since last summer, which fortunately on the House side, Representative Bloomingdale was also an ex officio member. The Senator Knoyer was not. So we'll see where that goes. I've heard it actually may not move anywhere this year, but we really don't know at this point.
Thank you much.
I would just add, the original recommendation reads like an AI chatbot wrote the recommendations, because it basically went through and anything that shared a word got merged or deleted. So my favorite is, and by favorite I mean the most absurd example I can give, is that it merges the boards of occupational therapy physical therapy, respiratory therapy, massage therapy. Not the same things, not the same skill sets. They don't require the same kinds of training. They don't have the same concerns. And I say that as a joke, but also taking it rather seriously, the areas of expertise are very different when you're talking about architects and landscape architects. And so the concern is that when you have something like merging architects with landscape architects, there are serious considerations when we talk about the landscape architecture with regards to flooding, with regards, I don't need to go into it, but basically the concern is that if you merge these boards, these smaller or less prominent occupations are going to essentially go unremarked upon. And that's a genuine concern of mine. So,
yeah, if I could, I'd add two things. One is, I think at various points, both Representative Zabner and I attempted to ask to attend so-called subcommittees that were happening as part of this committee this past summer. It never happened, and I'm not actually convinced that there were any subcommittees. We just don't know. And the other point is this is sort of phase 2 of the governor's big reorganization of state government, and it's part of the stripping away of Iowans' voices and representation in state government. So we have to look at it very carefully.
Hi, Eileen Barron. I'm League of Women Voters member and Washington County resident, and I appreciate being able to come up here and hear some of the issues because my representatives are not speaking to some of these things. And I just wanted to give a little plug. If anyone would like to know about forums that Senator Driscoll and Representative Hora are in, please give me your email afterward, and I would like to keep you informed about forums that are happening in Washington County. My comment is, Amy, you mentioned that as far as the eminent domain bill, that there was some bad, negative press, and I saw it too, and I apologize, I don't know more detail, but there was a criticism that the Democrats didn't debate it enough.
Yep.
And I just was wondering if you could speak to that.
Sure. Believe me, we talked about this a lot. It had been through a subcommittee, it had been through a committee. Democrats really believe that our vote was our voice. We passed that bill. We didn't need to stand up and showboat like other certain representatives like to do and tell people to shove it or, flip them off. Democrats believe that our vote was our voice. We put up the 51st vote. We passed that bill when Republicans couldn't do it. That is the story. I could get up and say a million words that reporters would never, ever put in the news because they're not as flashy and sexy as telling someone to take their money and shove it. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not there to cause a scene. I'm not there to be flashy. I'm there to vote and to represent the people in my district and the people of Iowa. I don't know, you know what? We could have said so much and it still wouldn't have been enough and it would have been wrong. Our votes speak for themselves. We passed that bill.
Since Jacoby isn't here, I'll say I don't have a problem flipping people off.
He doesn't.
And from the Senate perspective, none of these bills have yet to come before the Senate.
Yeah.
There was one last year, never had a subcommittee. The ones that passed the House this year and have come over, I don't believe, they have to formally be assigned a subcommittee, but every committee has its kill subcommittee. So if it goes to a specific couple of members on the majority side, that's that's the subcommittee that's designed to kill a bill. And my theory is that the reason we haven't seen it in the Senate is because they know it would pass. They would have enough Republican votes combined with Democratic votes, it would pass. So ask yourselves why that is. And who benefits.
Hi, my name's Jessica Roman. I do have a question, but first I just want to give my very heartfelt thanks for the support and the encouragement that educators in Johnson County and Iowa and AEA professionals have received from you all this session. It has been brutal. And knowing that I have legislators that are listening and paying attention has been really important. I actually serve an area south of here that has had some empty seats and no real opportunities to communicate on the behalf of families I've served, so I very much appreciate that. I've been to the Capitol a few times this session, and I was struck by the number of armed patrolmen in rooms during public hearings, metal detectors, when you walk in, and so I would like to make a proposal for next year. I'm curious as to the Republicans who introduced and back House File 2586 of arming teachers, how they would feel if maybe we could save some money by taking those armed patrolmen out of the Capitol and arming other legislators. You could have a once-a-year training for that.
So there's no training, but they are armed.
They are armed.
Yeah, there is actually no restriction.
We don't go through the metal detectors. And actually, members of the public can be armed in the bubble. They took down a beautiful bronze plaque this session, not 100% sure why, I asked, didn't get an answer, that says the only weapon allowed in the Capitol is, handguns are the only weapon allowed in the Capitol. So I leave my multi-tool in the car, but yeah.
So that said, I wonder how they would feel if that was your security. And on that same bill, I'm happy to hear that there's a chance that it may not actually make it to the Senate floor. As a former classroom teacher, I can't even fathom carrying a gun on my person in a classroom full of kids. I think Molly Buck stated it very well when she said, I would take a bullet for any of my 26 kids. I would never risk putting one in one of them. And my actual question, so about a year and a half ago, Governor Reynolds announced a $75 million chunk of money that was federal pandemic money intended to increase security in schools. Since that time, I think there's been one school district in our area that's been successful in actually being able to complete the paperwork to get those funds. That was Solon. It sounds like they worked closely with our Johnson County Sheriff's Office. Is there any discussion about maybe we need to make prevention easier than arming teachers? How do we make this money more available, easier for school districts to apply for and actually get, and not require a year and a half of back and forth paperwork to help prevent some of those potential school security issues?
Yeah, that's a great question. I want to start by just saying thank you for all your work educating kids in the state of Iowa, and I'm so sorry for what's happened this session. I think one of the big arguments on the whole discussion around special education and area education agencies and Republican attempts to give the Department of Education more power is the absolute ineptitude of that department under Director Snow and under Governor Reynolds. I mean, it's not just in Johnson County, it's all over the state. A very, very small amount of money has been spent. They are completely inept at doing their job. And if you watch that Senate confirmation hearing for the new education director, Mackenzie Snow, who has no classroom experience, who has no credentials as an educator, who is a former lobbyist for school vouchers. I mean, it is a disaster in that department. And that was part of why we were so passionate about making sure that control for these types of services stayed with our area education agencies, which are elected by our local school boards, which are elected by voters in our local communities. And so you're absolutely right. I think there's been a lot of conversation around how to get that school hardening money out, and we're going to continue to have that conversation. But the root of the problem is that the Department of Education under Governor Reynolds is fundamentally broken.
Okay, anyone else who has a question? We've got time for one more.
Can I just ask, can we open those doors back up? It's getting real, real hot. I know it got loud for a minute, but it's just real, real warm in here.
We're a little warm. We're almost done, Amy.
Oh, okay, well.
Thank you to all of you for your questions and those of you who responded. This is very informative. We will conclude this forum with closing remarks from each of our legislators. Legislators will have 3 minutes each for their remarks, and we will begin with Senator Janice Weiner.
Thank you all. Again, thank you for coming, but Representative Zabner created a great segue for what I'm going to say. We're in the confirmation process in the Senate now. We have before us a couple of proposed heads of departments. Both of them, one actually is the current head, the other is acting, and that's Mackenzie Snow. We did force a public hearing on Mackenzie Snow, which is something that we can do under the confirmation rules, happen to be Rule 59 in the Senate. Representative Zabner is right; she's completely unqualified. Again, this is a good opportunity to let your senators and other senators in the state know. It's the very low bar that we should have someone running our Department of Education who did not help destroy special education in Virginia, and who is not a participant in the history curriculum debacle in Virginia. That's not who we need leading our Department of Education. We don't need someone who's just going to do whatever the governor asks her to. We need someone who is qualified to lead that department. The other one who is up and who has really not done, in my view, a good job at all is Kayla Lyons, who's head of the Department of Natural Resources. She's presided over one disaster after another. I've talked on the floor recently a couple of times about the huge spill in southwestern Iowa into the East Nishnabotna that has killed an estimated 750,000 fish, not to mention other forms of wildlife. It is an ecological disaster of massive proportions, the 5th largest fish kill in the history of the state of Iowa, and that there are many other issues that have occurred as well. We're $100 million short in funding repairs to our state parks. We've pulled out rangers living in our state parks, yet the budget that Kayla Lyons requested this year is flat. She is up for confirmation as well. I suggest that would be another good one to weigh in on. That's where Iowans can, at least at a minimum, let their voices be heard. Oh, and I would add also in the C60 disaster in Marengo, Iowa, that has had to have the EPA step in to assist. There's no reason we should be where we are ecologically in the state. The Department of Natural Resources should not just simply be a yes person to the governor. They should be standing up for our wildlife and our habitat in this state. So I think we should be looking at accountability in this state. I think we should be looking at what gives Iowans opportunity. I would love to be lobbying for things and voting for things instead of fighting against things. And that's what we need to be looking at going forward. So again, thanks to all of you. And there are still important issues to come, both in these nominations and in the budget.
Thank you. Amy Nielsen is next.
Thanks. I just want to say again, thank you to everybody who is here. Thank you to everybody who has come in the past to bring up issues and to be there to support us. It really does mean a lot. I'm sure that there's been some of your faces up in Des Moines, and whenever we see you, I'm sure our faces immediately light up, and there's just this sense of, oh, somebody that we actually like is here. and it's always just really nice to see you. This is the last time, I guess, we will probably address you before elections in November. I want to encourage everybody to please pay attention to these elections. There are a couple of, special ones that will impact Johnson County, even though they're not necessarily completely Johnson County seats. We have one candidate here with us today, Anna, in House District 91 and 90. Yep, 92. She's in 92. And then we also have another really great one in House District 91. We need to get the heck out of Iowa City and help these people. Okay? We're safe. Where we can, no, it's okay, you can clap. We're safe. Where we need your help, your attention, your time, your money is in 91 and 92.
we need more help up there in the House. The House has the opportunity to gain back some seats this time. We won't take the majority this time, most likely, but if we do, that'd be great. But even having more seats gives us more leverage. You saw what can happen with our eminent domain bill. Republicans couldn't get it passed. Democrats could. If we have more Democrats, we can actually stop some things. So please pay attention to those races, and please remember that Iowa City is pretty safe. Turnout is important, but what we need is people in 91 and 92. I also just want to take this opportunity as we close out this General Assembly and Representative Levin and Representative Zabner and their first assemblies. I just want to say that they were very amazing additions to our Johnson County delegation. Those of you in the room that are represented by one of them, they did you proud. They do you proud every single day. And I really look forward to continuing working with them and building our Democratic majority in the House. And the things that we're going to be able to do with a Democratic majority in the House, I just can't wait. I just can't wait. We're going to do some common sense things. We're going to listen to Iowans and not just special interests who give us money. And I can't wait to have some help. And I hope you're there next year with us. Yeah, I guess that's probably the story, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you all.
Thank you. Next is Elinor Levin.
Thank you all for coming out. It always makes me a little bit sad that the last forum comes before the budget process, because I didn't really understand the schedule of events at the Capitol until I got there. But as Senator Weiner mentioned, as has been sort of referenced, the budget does not run the way it should because of that lack of balance at the Capitol. So last year, I had forgotten that in the Senate they passed blank budget bills. Wow. On our side, our budget subcommittees do meet and hear from some of the parties who are represented by the budget, and have, like, I sit on the education budget, and I had the opportunity to meet with Director Snow, Acting Director Snow. I had the opportunity to meet with our regents' universities. I've had the opportunity to meet with IJAG and some of the other groups, the Department for the Blind, that are under our budget. But then last year, our budgets got pulled out of those budget subcommittees, the groups who had spent literally 3 months educating themselves on those budgets. And instead, they were run by subcommittees from the Appropriations Committee who didn't have that background knowledge, hadn't spent time developing that expertise. And not only were they run through those, were they pulled out of our subcommittees and run through other groups, they even moved the locations of some of those meetings, so I didn't even get to be in the room when the education budget subcommittee was held. So that's just something that I'm really paying close attention to this year. This is the point in the year where we're really determining what our priorities are and what we're going to fight for in those budgets, and hearing from folks back home is helpful on that. Ensuring that we, as this moves very quickly, have an understanding of how the budget targets that we see are going to impact folks back home and statewide. It can be tough. And so I just would mention, if you see something or you hear about something through a professional organization or through a friend or through an advocate, that don't assume we know. These budgets come fast, and we don't sit on all of them, and we don't all have the information. And so it's always a great idea to reach out, even if it's to say, maybe you already know this, but it's the best emails I get are the ones from back home saying, this is how this is going to impact me. So thank you to everybody who takes the time to reach out. Thank you to everybody who takes the time to find a way to help their friends make a plan to vote. Thank you to everybody who does voter registration, everybody who does voter services, everybody who ensures that democracy is working for Iowans, because genuinely we need to bring a little balance back to the state, and that starts with that work. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Last but not least, Adam Zabner.
Yeah, I want to thank everyone for coming today and for this series of 6 forums in my first term. serving you in the state legislature. I'm the youngest member of the legislature, and I sure came in with a lot of goals, but also a lot of things that I needed to learn. And so these forums and a lot of the people in this room who regularly call me or I call you to ask about issues is really made a big difference in my ability to do this job. I want to say thank you. Also to the two really experienced members of our House delegation, Representative Nielsen and Representative Jacoby, who I've gone to a lot, who have taught me a lot about the process, and I think really are a big part of why I feel like I've been a more successful legislator this session than last session, and why I hope to be an even more successful legislator next year if the folks of this district choose to give me another term. We need different leadership in this state. You know, we can joke about it, you know, and we do, but what is happening in Des Moines is wrong. The people of the state of Iowa are not represented in Des Moines. And that's going to take a lot of work to change. And so I'm asking all of you who have ever been angry about something over the last 2 years to commit to helping us get some more friends, just like Representative Nielsen said. You know, that means after this forum, going through your contacts, texting a couple friends. It's never too early to start reminding them about November. It may mean knocking doors over the summer. It means writing checks. We have recruited really incredible candidates. The filing deadline was a couple weeks ago. Democrats are running in 75 out of 100 seats. Republicans are only running in 74. Democrats have recruited 43 new candidates compared to fewer than 20 that Republicans have recruited. And these are really terrific people. Someone mentioned Molly Buck earlier. Molly Buck's another member of our freshman class who flipped a seat last time. She beat a Republican incumbent. And she's made a huge impact fighting for Iowans. She's a 5th grade teacher. She understands education. There's a lot of people from the education space who have seen this AEA proposal and have put their name in the ring. They need our help. So I'm asking all of you to commit to making sure that we have more friends next year up in Des Moines, and I want to thank you all for all your hard work and advocacy.
Thank you.
And go Hawks. No one said that yet.
Well, thank you to the local television staff for recording this event and live streaming it on the League's Facebook page. Rebroadcasts of this forum will run on Iowa City Channel 4, Coral Vision, and North Liberty TV. See their respective websites for programming. Thank you all for coming today, and a special thank you to our legislators. Thank you for coming and sharing your thoughts, and thank you for your continued work on our behalf. Thank you.